It's so great to have an alum of Teach First here to do the introductions. And you all are so good to still be hanging in there at the end of this very long day. So I'm excited to, there we go. I'm excited to just share, I guess, a bit about what I've learned over the last 25 years in this, starting with Teach for America, but more recently over the last 7 years, just in the process of building the Teach for All network, and how what I've learned has, I guess, informed our efforts and also fueled our sense of urgency about this work. So let's see if I can get coordinated here. What am I supposed to do? Okay, maybe I was, there we go. So Teach for All exists to address the fact that socioeconomic background predicts educational outcomes and in turn life outcomes all around the world. This is very true in my own country of the United States, despite aspiring to be a land of equal opportunity. And I grew up in a little community in Dallas, Texas. You can see it there on the map. Called Highland Park. It's a little bubble. It calls itself a bubble for its kind of lack of diversity and disadvantage. And, probably 97% of the kids in Highland Park graduate from high school, and over 90% graduate from college. Highland Park is just right next door to a big school district called Dallas Independent School District, where 14% of the kids, and it's a big district, but 14% will get a college degree. Most of those kids are low income, and the fact is that in my country, while 80% of the kids in the top quartile of family income will get a college degree, 8% of kids in the bottom quartile of family income will get a college degree. This problem, which inspired me to come up with the idea for Teach for America way back in the day, 25 years ago, is also a global problem. It really plays itself out all over the world. Joe is a student in rural southwest China. He will have about a 5% chance of going to college. Sana is an elementary student in Delhi. 60% of her peers will not make it through even elementary school. And Manuel in Buenos Aires, half of the kids, like Manuel, will not graduate from high school. So it's just a pervasive problem all over the world. There's something else that's a universal all over the world, which is that education is transformational. You increase educational levels and you make economies more prosperous, you improve, health, you make the world a more peaceful place, you make our environment more sustainable. If we took all the low-income countries around the world and ensured just basic literacy levels, we ensured that all the kids would learn to read, we would bring 171 million more kids above the poverty line, ultimately. So, of course, we know all of that, and in fact, all around the world, and you hear it here at this conference, and you hear it everywhere, and I've discovered it's another universal, there is a deep commitment to improve education. People want to fix it. They would love to fix it tomorrow. Like, we would just like to fix it soon. And I think that mindset leads us to a lurch from one silver bullet solution to the next. I could name every year for the last 25 years in public education in my own country in terms of the effort to improve it. If you go back far enough, there was a year when we thought if we could just make every curriculum a project-based curriculum, we would solve inequity. Like if all low-income kids were taught with a project-based curriculum, like the kids at the exclusive schools like Exeter and Andover were taught with project-based curriculums. We've gone through the years and we've had a new silver bullet every year. Give every parent a voucher. Make every school a charter. Give every kid a computer. And now the big fad in our country is fix the teachers and you'll fix the problem. I've discovered in my travels that this is a worldwide phenomenon. Whenever I say that, people are just like, lots of head nodding, like I'm actually seeing in this room as well. The problem is there is no one solution. You know, giving parents a voucher, for example, can free them from being stuck in, you know, in a system that isn't serving them well. But it only provides them and their kids with access to a great education if there are options to send their kids to. You know, charter laws can provide the kind of flexibility that has enabled some of the highest performing schools I've ever seen. But the problem is that the laws alone don't create those schools, which creates the reality that, at least in our country, you know, all the research shows that charter schools are actually no better than traditional public schools on average. You know, we can, you know, give every kid a computer, but if we don't do that inside of a school where the foundations are strong, the culture is strong, the leadership, the teaching is strong, then we won't solve the problem. So each of these pieces can be part of the solution, but none of them are the panacea. Let's see. This makes sense because the problem of educational inequity is a very complex and deeply systemic problem. We have it, first of all, because the most marginalized kids are facing a whole lot of extra challenges that other kids don't face. You know, depending on the context, they could be facing the challenges of poverty, they could be facing the challenges of remoteness as they do in rural China. You know, lots of extra challenges. And they show up at school systems that don't have the extra capacity, the extra resources to meet the extra needs of their kids. And, you know, there's a set of mindsets and policies and practices that, of course, perpetuate all of those issues. So reversing the cycle is going to take a whole lot, right? It's going to take, first of all, taking some of the pressure off of schools by actually strengthening our communities, improving our economies, improving the social services and health services and early educational opportunities and, you know, nutrition that kids have. And at the same time, it's going to take building stronger schools. Certainly until we've fixed all those other kind of socioeconomic issues, we're going to have to figure out, how do we lengthen our school days? How do we connect the additional resources and supports that kids who face extra challenges need to actually excel? How do we ensure that the people and the leadership in our schools are up for the extra challenge of taking kids who do face extra challenges, but also have tremendous strengths, and ensuring that they can actually fulfill their true potential? And doing all of that is going to take changing mindsets, and you know, so that all of our policies and practices are built on the conviction that all kids do have tremendous potential, and also a deep understanding of what it takes to ensure that they're set up to fulfill that potential. It's going to take creating a policy environment that's conducive to the kinds of changes that we need to see within our communities and within our schools. So in short, it's going to take a whole lot of things. And you know, if you try to solve the problem by going at any one aspect of it, you know, you're just going to see another aspect of it pop up. You know, no one intervention, exactly, no one hammer. It's like playing whack-a-mole. You punch one thing and something else comes up. Let's see. So when we do act on a recognition that, you know, success is going to require doing lots of things really well, we succeed. Consider this tale of two schools. So here's the first school. This is a school called the School of the Future. It was opened in 2006, and a very big technology company invested $60 million in this school in Philadelphia. It opened to great fanfare. You know, it was going to have the latest and greatest of technology. By 2009, this school had actually managed to underperform the Philadelphia public school system, which anyone who knows, it's a real feat. 8% of their kids were proficient in math, 23% in reading. This school has thankfully made some progress in recent years. I think as of 2013, they were doing better than the district. And what happened is that the system leaders ultimately realized that technology alone wasn't going to create a great school. They recruited a new school leader. They let that school leader go out and strengthen the school faculty. They basically put in place the foundations of a strong school, and now that team is leveraging technology to better meet the needs of their kids. Now, in 2009, Gaurav Singh started a different kind of school in Mumbai. His school serves now 240 little kids, pre-K and kindergarten and first grade kids. They're kids who are growing up in the neighborhood surrounding the school in the slums of Mumbai. They know 16 different languages when they come in. By the first grade, his kids, and it's an English medium school, his kids are reading and understanding and speaking, fluently in English. Now, when you spend time with Gaurav and his team, you realize just how much has gone into getting the results that he gets. First of all, he has been absolutely obsessed with recruiting and developing a very strong team of teachers. He literally has traveled actually around the world trying to understand the best pedagogical practices and building the instructional program of the school. This school has kids day long. I mean, these start with 3 and 4-year-olds, and they're going to school, much longer than most kids in this community go to school. They work with the parents to help educate them around changing the nutritional diet of the kids so that they're actually eating more nutritious food. They're serving breakfast, and I'm only beginning the list of what has gone into getting the outcomes that they get. Now, imagine if we had whole communities of Gauravs and teams creating schools like that, and if in addition we were also taking on some of the issues that go on in that community, the issues of poverty and such, that make the job of this school so challenging. It would be a beautiful world, right? We'd start seeing educational disparities close and educational levels rise. But boy, it would be a ton of work. Who would do all of that work? Now that, I'm having trouble with this clicker here, is what motivates all of the partners of the Teach for All network, which are pretty much obsessed with, recruiting and cultivating more leaders like Gaurav, who happened to enter Teach for India in its first cohort about 5 years ago, to channel their energy in this direction so that they can take on all the many things that need to get done. All around the world, unfortunately, most of our nation's most precious resources, the most precious resource being our most educated and high potential talent, are not yet channeling their energy towards education, but rather towards, finance and all sorts of other industries that very aggressively recruit them. And so that is the thing that these programs are working to change. And they do that by going out and recruiting very aggressively on their campuses and among their young professionals. They're looking for the most highly sought after, folks at the beginning of their career trajectories in their countries. They're positioning these programs in a way that draws the top talent. They're calling upon their sense of service, their desire to make a real difference, their desire to give something back to their countries. And they're making it possible for people who who literally have the most other career options and are under a lot of pressure from their families and from society in general to actually act on their inclination to want to make a difference. And one of the key ways they set themselves up to do that is by requiring only a 2-year initial commitment. So these programs are calling on these recent grads to say, instead of committing 2 years to go to that management training program, commit 2 years to teach in our highest need communities, and a lifetime, to working on these issues. These programs then, and I should go back and say, all around the world, and maybe some of you know that Teach First, which Brett, who's sitting here, started in the UK about 11 years ago, is now the top graduate recruiter in the UK, just stunning recruitment success. Teach for America as well, each year, inspires more than 50,000, graduating college seniors and recent grads to compete for the opportunity and honor of teaching in our urban and rural communities. If 11 years ago in the UK or 25 years ago in the US, folks had predicted that our top grads at the Oxfords and the Cambridges and the Harvards, Princeton, and the Yales, and far beyond that, very diverse groups of people were actually competing to do that, no one would have believed it. And I think at the outset of the Teach for All network 7 years ago, there was lots of question about whether this model would be the same kind of magnet for talent in very diverse contexts as it has been in the US and the UK. And I have to say, it's been pretty stunning. Teach for India just had 13,000 people apply, despite recruiting still at only a select number of universities. I was just in Colombia, where they had 2,400 people apply for 60 spots. In Pakistan, I see Noor, the head of Teach for Pakistan. Last I saw, there were over 1,000 people applying for 40 spots in the Teach for Pakistan program. So really, all over the world, we're seeing, just how much this magnetizes not just anyone, but truly, if you met the people coming into these programs, they're the kind of people any of you would want to employ, just incredible people who've really demonstrated tremendous leadership. These Teach for All partners then invest a lot in those teachers in terms of their own development. The idea is that those 2 years, first of all, they're very important for the kids in their classrooms. And we're trying to produce forces of teachers who are not just surviving their first year, but are actually excelling with their kids and helping put them on a path to greater options and greater choices down the line. And at the same time are learning the lessons of success that come from succeeding with their kids, so that they come out of this knowing their kids had incredible potential and with a real understanding of what it takes to meet their extra needs and set them up for success. These programs have a 2-year program of professional development, essentially. It starts with a very intensive pre-service summer, and these teachers are clustered in schools and receive ongoing coaching during 2 years. And the results bear out just how much is invested in the training and support and in the recruitment and selection of these teachers. Not only in the US and the UK, where very rigorous independent research has really substantiated the impact. In the US this year, Mathematica Policy Research released a gold standard study, randomly assigned kids to the classrooms of TFA teachers and other teachers, and it found that, and this was all looking at math classes, but the math teachers who came in through Teach for America moved their kids forward 2.6 extra months compared to other teachers, veteran teachers, other new teachers who are traditionally certified in their schools in any given year. There are many other studies that kind of bear out the same results. In the UK, Teach First, the University of Manchester, if I have that right, did a study that showed that schools that hire Teach First teachers actually do better than those that don't. And even the newer Teach for All programs, the IEDB has funded a study where the preliminary results show that Enseña Chile teachers have a greater impact not only on the academic achievement, but on the socio-emotional outcomes of the kids in their classrooms. Columbia University is doing a study on Teach for India, and the preliminary results showed that in terms of academic achievement, the students made 4 times the gains in the Teach for India classrooms than in the other classrooms in their schools. At the same time, though, these programs, again, are not just about those 2 years. They're about the 2 years, and they're about every year thereafter. And so these programs put a tremendous amount of energy as well into the leadership development of the teachers while they're, in their 2-year commitment and beyond. We think it's very exciting. You can't really see this beautiful slide, but if you look closely, in this bottom left corner from where you're sitting, you see teachers. And we think it's very exciting when these folks stay beyond their 2 years. Many of them do. I think it's something like 60% of the first teachers teach beyond their 2 years. Many of the Teach for America teachers stay in the classroom as well. Of the overall 30,000 plus alumni force in the U.S., 37% of those folks, 10,000 teachers, are still working full-time even beyond their 2 years. So we think that's great. But per the previous discussion, they can't all stay in the classroom because we can't begin to solve this problem from within classrooms alone. So we need some of them to leave. They need to become school principals, school system leaders, policymakers, community organizers, social entrepreneurs to innovate both within education and outside of education to take on some of the outside needs. And so these programs invest a lot, not only in supporting those who want to stay in the classroom, but also in accelerating their path to leadership in some of these other fields that we know will be critical in the given context. Now, it's pretty powerful to do this work within a global network. We have seen just firsthand over the last 7 years of being in this, first of all, just how true it is that diverse cultures inspire innovation. And at the same time, we've seen that the fact that there are such patterns in the nature of this problem from place to place means that the solutions are shareable. And so, we have this incredible opportunity as part of a global network. Every time we bring in a new partner, and we're now at 33 actually, having just brought in the Romanian program, but every time we bring in a new partner, it's another set of, organizations and also teachers and kind of pioneering alumni who will invent new solutions, share them with each other, and accelerate progress. I knew I was forgetting something on this last slide. I want to go back for 2 seconds because, we talk about, the results we see in the classroom based on these independent studies. And I want to talk a bit about the results we see actually among these alumni, and especially when you get into thinking about, gosh, how can we accelerate each other's progress by being part of a global network? So much of it is because of what these alumni do in their own countries and then share with each other and have the potential to spread around the world. So, literally, 2/3 of, when we look across the network at all of the programs in the Teach for All network, between 50 and 70% of these alumni are actually staying within education, which is, not something that people would have predicted. Some leave, and we think that's important, again, because without enlightened business leaders and policy leaders and a bunch of others, we're not going to solve this problem. But it just shows you how transformational this experience was, for the teachers themselves. This past week, I went to the Washington, D.C. Event, annual event, and it was celebrating 23 years of Teach for America in Washington, D.C., and the mayor of D.C. stood up and said, I always say I love Teach for America, but I want to prove it. And he ran through a slideshow to prove it. The first slide showed a picture of the school's chancellor in Washington, D.C., who's a Teach for America alum from 1992. The second showed a picture of his aide for education, Abigail Smith, who's a Teach for America alum from 1991. The third showed a picture of the state superintendent for the Washington, D.C. state, Jesus Aguirre, who was a Teach for America alum from 1990. Then he showed a picture of the leadership team of the district, all the people in the cabinet roles, every one of whom is a Teach for America alum. Then he showed a picture of this year's Teacher of the Year, who, again, is a Teach for America alum, who's been teaching for 13 years and is the fourth in a row Teacher of the Year to be a TFA alum. And, he stopped himself there, but truly could have gone on. And I share that story just because I think this is a very long-term strategy. We won't really see, we'll see immediate impacts. I mean, you can see immediate impacts, 1 year and 2 years in the classroom. And then 3 to 5 years out, you start seeing these young alums out there pioneering new solutions already. I mean, I was just in India. They've only been going at it for 5 years. You meet with their alums, and it's incredible to see what they're doing. They hold big roles in city systems, big roles in the Prathams of the world. They're starting new schools. They're starting new organizations to train a new, generation of political leaders. So you see it early on. But 15 years in, 20 years in, you really, and Washington, D.C., by the way, is the fastest improving urban district in the U.S. right now, which is just testament to, the power of leadership to actually change things in a fundamental way. And that's why, when you start thinking about all these folks from India to Malaysia to Lebanon to Pakistan to the next place who come out of their experience on fire, just determined we have to change things for the kids that we've come to know and love, and pioneer new solutions, but as part of a global network where everyone's sharing solutions, we think it can just hugely accelerate progress over time, and are really envisioning a world where in maybe ultimately nearly every country, there are organizations channeling their most promising future leaders against this challenge, cultivating their leadership, their pioneering innovations, but as part of a global network where we're all sharing solutions, and as a result, where the movements we're working to build are actually accelerating faster than they otherwise would. And given what we were discussing earlier about the fundamental importance of education, in a world as interconnected as ours, where our economic prosperity, our public safety, our environmental sustainability, are all linked, a world of rising educational levels and decreasing educational disparities is just a better world for all of us. So that is what motivates us. We are actually very convinced that we could see this day in our lifetimes if enough of our many countries' future leaders chose to channel their energy in the direction of making it happen. That's what we're working toward, obviously. It's very hard work to make it happen, and to ensure that the people we do recruit fulfill their true potential, which is why we need so much help, so much partnership. Each of these programs partners very closely with so many different educational institutions and other institutions, and certainly the private sector and the public sector in their respective countries, but we need a whole lot more help, which is why I'm excited to see all of you here. So I thank you for coming, even at the end of a long day, and I hope we can find ways to work together, and really look forward to the discussion.
So we've got a few minutes for you to ask any questions. Any first ones?
Hi there. My name's Gemma. I work for a website called The Conversation. We get academics to write articles kind of in a journalistic way, bringing their research to the fore. I just had a question. So I know in the UK the Teach First model is kind of supported by the government, so the funding comes, I think the placement funding comes through the government. Is that the same in all the Teach for All models? Is it all backed by government funding, or is it some of it kind of charity funded? How does it work across the world?
Well, so I wasn't sure which type of funding you're referring to, but first of all, these teachers need to get hired into teaching positions. And so the question of where the salaries come from, that's one question. And in most of the countries, the salaries for the teachers are coming from the government. And that's the optimal, and it's what everyone is working toward. And getting these folks into regular beginning teacher positions that are just vacant is also key to ensuring that these folks can continue to teach beyond the classroom. So then there's the question of where does the funding come from to actually pay for recruiting and selecting and training and supporting these teachers. In the UK, I think it's 70%, or?
It's about a third comes from the central government, a third is
Yeah. In the US, it's like 70% private funded, 30% publicly funded, mostly from school districts and states with a little bit from the federal government. You know, some of the partners of Teach for All have gotten their governments to invest at high levels, like Teach for Malaysia has as one notable example. Most of them have started with the premise that we're going to prove that this works using private sector support and then convince the governments to invest as a way to scale up the programs over time. Yeah.
What problems have you run into with the teachers' unions and your training model, especially in the United States?
So, you know, we're not displacing teachers, and our teachers join the union at the same rates as other new teachers. That's certainly the case in the US, and you know, obviously we're trying everything we can to work collaboratively with the teachers' unions. So by and large, thankfully, we haven't had, you know, union issues. I think, you know, this is a model that counters traditional paradigms. It's a different way of training teachers, and that's where the kind of tension around this comes from. You know, we're taking people who didn't go through, you know, campus-based teacher education programs necessarily. I mean, maybe they did, but only a tiny fraction usually in any of these programs. And then placing them in the most challenging teaching situations. And if they're successful, what does that show? So the extent to which there are linkages between the schools of education and the unions, and the extent to which these alums go out and try to change the world, you know. And in the US, we've seen these TFA alums changing the world, you know. Laws around how teachers are brought into the profession have changed in 48 states in the last 5 years, and at the center of it in every case was a bunch of TFA alums. And that can also create some issues where some of these union folks wake up and think, maybe we should try to slow this down. But we really have worked to be very collaborative, and we have folks on all sides of the political spectrum among our alumni force. So.
What impact have you seen in the area of certification? Because in the states have certain requirements for teacher certification programs. What has TFA's impact been in that area in terms of policy?
So the question was around, you know, what has the impact of Teach for America or Teach First or any of these programs been on the teacher certification and licensure laws? You know, I think there's a trend kind of outside of our organizations in a way to open up teacher licensure so that, you know, folks who may not have chosen that path initially, you know, but can enter the profession through other channels. I think the example of these programs, you know, which go about this in such a rigorous way. They're recruiting so aggressively, they're selecting people according to very high standards, they're investing a lot in their training and support, they're investing in their ongoing development, and the results are there. So I think these programs they've provided evidence for policymakers to expedite the degree to which, you know, these alternative routes to certification exist. So, you know, when we started out in the US, one state had an alternate route to certification. Now they all do. 40% of new teachers in the US now come in through alternate routes to certification. I wouldn't like take the credit for that, but I'm sure that the example of Teach for America has helped to accelerate that. And this is one of the central challenges we try to figure out, you know, as really not even we, but the social entrepreneurs in all these different countries work to figure out how to get their teachers in these systems. They need to make sure that the regulatory environment is conducive. So they're out there trying to figure out how to create alternate paths to teacher certification where they don't already exist.
Hi, thank you for a great presentation. I had a question. I was thinking about Pakistan actually. So it's a question about scale. So 40 teachers he has now. Pakistan has 1 million teachers in public systems alone. And your model is interesting in that you basically, like you said, the problem with these systems is they get teachers from these sort of not so good education institutes, and the teachers come in, they really are becoming teachers because they can't do anything else, right? So you kind of flip the model. Have you considered sort of a public-private partnership with the governments, especially in these developing countries, to say, look guys, you know, change your model so that you allow this particular type of activity to happen, and they'll probably actually, in the long run, it's more scalable, right? I mean, so have you considered something like that, or?
So I'd say a few things. First of all, I do think it's really important, as I think you understand from the nature of your question, like to embrace these as not actually efforts to change the teaching profession. I mean, this is really an effort to develop leadership capacity, right? Like to, for the short term for kids in classrooms today, because teaching successfully in low-income communities is an act of leadership, but also for the long run, and so none of these programs are trying to provide the nation's teachers, although they are looking to their alumni to go out and affect the gamut of systemic changes that need to happen. This said, they need to attain a certain degree of scale in order to begin to respond, given the magnitude of the problem. The Teach for All partners have by and large chosen to start very small, get the foundations right, prove that it works, but with an intention to scale, to recruit as many as possible of their country's future leaders over time to channel their energy in this direction. I don't think that can happen without the kind of public and private sector partnership that has enabled Teach First growth or Teach for America's growth. And these programs have attained meaningful scale. I mean, it depends on how you define meaningful. There are 3.2 million teachers in the US. There are 11,000 Teach for America core members. But what that means is every single year now, there are about 6,000 of not just anyone, but the top graduates in the country channeling their energy into schools in low-income communities. And it means that they are between 25 and 50% of the new hires across the 50 highest need urban and rural centers in the US. Teach First is even bigger proportionally. You're in a better position to say what the statistics are.
Next year will be 10% of all new teachers in state schools.
Okay, so 10%. So the capacity, and it's our mission to make sure that we attain. I mean, we're trying to ensure that this program across the world attains the kind of scale and impact necessary to actually move the needle against the problem. So we need help in forging those public and private sector partnerships, though I'm sure Noor is sitting here thinking, can you help me out in Pakistan? Because, yeah, that's what we need. But we've also found it to be important. Like, there's something about an independent social enterprise that can move very quickly, be responsive, not sway with the political winds. So that's one of our principles, actually. It has to be an independent social enterprise under the control of no one entity, but working in public and private sector partnership.
My name is Kumbi. I work with Junior Achievement Nigeria, and we're thinking of starting Teach for All Nigerian chapter very soon. My questions are twofold. I'd asked Brad earlier some questions in the day, and he's been able to give some solution. The first question I'll ask is about the schools, low income, disadvantaged. There's some schools that are disadvantaged, but they're not in low income. So how do you select the schools? Because now you find some schools are fee paying, but they're in very, very disadvantaged areas. And I look at the example you gave about the school in Philadelphia. What if, for some reason, you have such schools clamor for Teach for All teachers and are willing to support and say for the support, would also like to support another school that is from a very disadvantaged area. And that takes me to things that happen in developing countries. I don't know about other parts of the world. I went to a state school, and it's so run down now. I can't send my own children to that school. But you find old students association, parents teachers association coming together to say they want to support. So if you have government supporting teachers to go into such schools, beyond private sector engagement, would you also have support from the Old Students Association and the Parents Teachers Association to have Teach First, Teach for All teachers in that school to upgrade? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
Well, first of all, it's very exciting to hear you thinking about bringing this to your country. we have the founder, actually, of the first African partner of Teach for All, Futi Mtoba of Teach South Africa, in the room here with us. I would say, so to your first question, this is all, each of these independent partners, so you yourself, if you're part of building Teach for Nigeria, need to define what problem are you working to address in your country. And then use that problem to guide your placement strategy. So I think many schools across many of these different countries will ask for Teach for X or Teach First, whatever teachers, or Teach South Africa teachers, and you need to be guided by your mission in determining where to place the precious resource that these people are. So, it starts with figuring out along which lines is educational inequity the greatest in this particular context, and what does that mean for where we place them. Your second question, the success of these programs we've found is it's so much about partnership, and it's also so much about, in the end, being successful in this is about what happens in local communities, and attaining enough of a critical mass in any given local community of these teachers, but working in partnership with the education system, the school principals, and the other supporting organizations, whether it's the parent association or whatever it may be, who are also working to improve schools in those areas, so that we're working together and informed by each other in terms of what it is that we're aspiring to for our students. So it raises a capacity question, around, how you set up your program. And I've come to believe that having local leaders, clustering teachers within their local community and being able to manage the partnership process is, many of the Teach for All partners are realizing just how key that is to the kind of sustainable, significant change that we're working toward. Well, there's quite an embrace from the charter movement towards Teach for America. I think, some of the first very high-performing charter schools in the U.S., the KIPP network, the Yes College prep schools, were started by Teach for America alums, and they've really fueled the growth of many of the high-performing schools. They're probably half the principals and, half the teachers of these schools. And so as that movement has grown, the number of teachers and principals and such in those schools have grown. And so some folks who believe that that's privatizing education will just associate Teach for America with that in an unfortunate way. But the fact is, Teach for America places only in public schools. The majority of its people are still going into traditional public schools. And now as the economy is picking up again and hiring is picking up, not only in the charters but in the regular schools, the percentage of folks who are placed in those schools will only grow. So, yeah.
You mentioned earlier that with the teachers that you recruit, after their 2-year period, some you want to go, and some you would like to participate in your leadership programs or other programs that you have in order for them to develop as policymakers or become leaders. Is there an opportunity for non-TFA alumni to participate in the training programs that you offer?
First of all, every Teach for All partner operates differently. And what they do with their alums and how they engage with the other, teachers in their communities is different. So there's probably no one answer. I think, the question is probably one of resources. These programs themselves are, out there scrounging for the resources necessary to do their core work. And so, I'm sure many of them would want to make it widely available if they had the resources to do so, but it's just a question of resources and focus. But I would look for the partner in your country and find out how they do it, because these programs are all about improving the regular system. It's just working in partnership with the public system to make things better. And so there's definitely a desire on the part of everyone to be collaborative, to contribute knowledge, to learn from the existing system and such.
Excuse me. In my country, there's a relationship between the infrastructure collapse and the disadvantaged schools. Now, if you're going to address only the teaching part, how do you sort of inform the government to have some sort of, adjustment in the collapse of the
Yeah.
infrastructure?
You know, I guess under the theory that any organization can only do so much, these partners, and again, they can all make their own calls, but the core mission that unites everyone is to focus on the leadership piece, with the assumption being that over time, they'll take on the infrastructure issues. I think about a very notable example in the US, in Baltimore, where a group of teachers last year mobilized their kids and the kids' parents and the community leaders to win a $1 billion tax levy from the state of Maryland to rebuild the public schools of Baltimore. So, again, our belief is lots of different things need to happen. Like, we need to build the infrastructure. We need to change the way all new teachers are brought into the profession. We need to probably redesign the way schools operate and figure out technological innovations that accelerate the pace of change. There's so much to do. And the real question is, who's going to do it? Who is going to do it? Who's going to go out and fight the fight on every front so that we affect the kind of comprehensive solutions that need to happen? And it's so hard to both recruit and cultivate the talent we need to do that I think most of these programs have made the choice to focus on that core mission, and then work in collaboration with others to affect the broader changes that need to happen. Yeah.
What took Teach for America, which I've known for many, many years, as an outstanding program, I guess I'm almost surprised it was only 7 years ago
Yeah.
that you went Teach for All. And I wondered why so long, and
Yeah.
what were the obstacles, or was it vision, or was it obstacles that made that transition
Yeah.
difficult?
Well, first of all, Brett started Teach First in 11 years ago again. So, but even then, I mean, when he called up, I was like, I'm so overwhelmed. We can ship you some boxes. Go for it. Because the problem in the U.S. is obviously so massive, and it was a journey getting Teach for America from point A to point B here. So a lot of it is just, I wasn't personally thinking, about anything outside of the borders of the U.S. And I think there was a certain year, like 8 or 9 years ago, when both Brett and I started hearing from, there was something in the water. All of a sudden, within 1 year, we heard from 13 different social entrepreneurs, from India to Lebanon to Chile to the next place. And they were determined to launch this in their countries. And we thought, it seemed like morally responsible to try to be helpful. And that led to the idea of Teach for All.
Has that in any way undermined your original goal to serve the U.S. to the extent that you
I think it's only helped. Teach for America, there's a different team that leads Teach for America now. I turned over the leadership of Teach for America a year ago. And, it's thriving. It's fighting the fight, and it's a tough environment right now in the U.S., but, they're going strong. And I personally believe, I'm not sure I understood this 7 years ago, but that the best thing I could do, even if all I cared about was Teach for America, is start Teach for All, because it's already generated so much innovation that's already fundamentally changed the way Teach for All operates. So it is a puzzle now that I think about it, like, why didn't we start the global effort earlier? And all I can, it's, and honestly, even now, it's so hard to convince people in the U.S. that it makes sense, because people just cannot think outside their borders. But I really believe, based on everything I've seen, this is an example. We got to take a global approach, because there's so much to be learned. There's so many brilliant people all around the world. There is such power in diversity, and there's such patterns around the world in the nature of the problems we all need to address. So we're all stronger working together. Yeah.
the notion that what makes it difficult for children to learn in U.S. schools are the same factors.
Yeah. No, we often say this at Teach for All. I mean, of course, there are many differences across borders, many differences, but the existence of the most marginalized kids looks a lot more similar to each other than it does to the most privileged kids in those countries. So, yeah, the answers for them are very similar.
Yes, this week I was at Teach for Bangladesh, and I saw one of the teachers with 106 children in their class, and but she was differentiating brilliantly. And I wrote her head of leadership, just some of the techniques she was using and how she was teaching 106 kids, giving different sorts of lessons for different groups of kids, and using team leaders in different ways and stuff. Which I was just thinking, wow, I think even a British or American teacher with 25, 30 kids in their class could learn those sort of techniques too. Which you need to do when you have 106 kids, but you actually should be using when you have 20 or 30 kids.
Just to follow up on that, and this is a question you've probably never been asked, but you get these great, high-achieving, high-flying kids, you throw them in East St. Louis or in New Orleans, and 2 years later, you've run them out of the profession. They want nothing to do with it because it was so difficult. And was there the support and training and pedagogy to allow them to know how to do that with 30 kids or 106 kids? I think you've answered that in part by what happens in the training.
I mean, the interesting thing is it's very rare. It's very rare that that's the result. I just looked at Teach for America's latest data, and 86% of 33,000 alumni are working full-time on issues that relate either to low-income communities or kids. 2/3 of the whole in education, and the rest in related things like public health, legal services, policy that relates, et cetera. I think the bigger thing is they leave both with a huge sense of possibility because of what they saw from their kids. They see they have real potential, and with a big sense of outrage. We're not setting them up. And it's those two things together that fosters the innovation. There's a study that Roland Fryer did at Harvard, he's an economist, who looked at the people who were right on the admissions line for a decade to TFA, people who did get in and didn't, but they look exactly the same, and then looked at what was different, 10 years later. And just as one thing, he found many big differences, but racial tolerance, he could not believe it. The difference between the people who did TFA and those who didn't was bigger than the difference between the white and black applicants to TFA in terms of racial tolerance. Which I say that just because belief in kids, identification, this is our problem. We got to solve it. So it's a very transformative experience.
And what stopped me from going from 30,000 to 60,000? Is it just the funding aspect?
Well, TFA is now growing at a much faster clip. As of Teach for America's, and this is to the point of, for Teach for Pakistan's over here with however many teachers, but Teach for America had 1,000 people as of its 10th year, and now in a $10 million budget, and now it has 11,000 and a $350 million budget. So it's, I think we learned how to do this, and hopefully Teach for All and the partners supporting each other can help these other newer partners get there sooner than we did.
Thank you for your questions. It's been fascinating. We're just about out of time. Do you have any final remarks, Wendy?
Oh, gosh. No, I love to talk, as you can tell, but no, I've probably expressed it all. I really think, you come together at these gatherings about improving education, and we talk a lot about a lot of the same things, like teacher training and technology and all, and those things are super important. I hope I'm not communicating that they're not. They're obviously fundamental, but we don't talk a lot about this leadership capacity question. And yet, from my perspective, I just look at even in my own country, I saw what was happening in communities 25 years ago, and I see what's happening in them today. And the kids born in a whole lot of communities in the US have completely fundamentally different options today. And that's for many reasons. But if you took all the Teach for America people out of the equation, all the alumni, you take away the leadership, the energy, the entrepreneurship that's driven the change. Leadership capacity. People who are deeply committed to this, who deeply understand that no one thing will solve this problem, who have a grounded understanding of how to solve it, getting to the point where you've got a critical mass of them working at every level of the system and across sectors, it's key. If we want to move the needle in this, we have to invest in this. So, you know, it's very hard. Like, the Noors of the world are out there scrounging around looking for tiny little amounts of money to incrementally grow their programs. We have to help the folks in Pakistan realize if we want to change our system, we've got to invest in leadership. Sorry, one last thing. One of my favorite people in the world who I admire so much and is just an icon in the kind of NGO world is the man who's here today, not in this room, but Fazal Abed, right? He grew BRAC, the biggest nonprofit in the world. They are known for their low-cost interventions, right? Like, they are getting millions and millions of dollars to get kids in school at the lowest cost possible. He is the deepest believer in this model, which I think is so interesting because this is not a low-cost intervention. We are investing in people. You can't do leadership development on the cheap. And, you know, he can tell you why. He's like, you know, I built BRAC not because one man could do anything, but because I decided I was going to invest in my leaders. And he's like, I invest a lot in them. I send them to Harvard to get master's degrees. And so I just think, you know, we have to help people understand the importance. And the sad thing is it's just not a quick fix. Like, it's not going to fix things and change it overnight or even within 5 years. But in the end, there's no other way. And the longer we wait to make this investment, the longer we put off the day when meaningful, fundamental, sustainable change can happen.
Wendy, thank you so much for your time. Sharing.